The unexpected was finally revealed by Charles Duke, the youngest astronaut to set foot on the moon, after 50 years of secret. He did not mention glory, nor did he mention Apollo 16's victory. Instead, he described an unplanned area, a signal that was stopped, or an object that was not on any map, something that had been hidden and that no report had dared to mention for 50 years. Although the fall was extremely stressful and tight, we persisted and reached the last minute before landing, even if our trajectory wasn't ideal. And this is the man who walked in the moon's shadow making his last admission. I am experiencing the thrill, the wonder, the excitement, and the adventure of being on the moon. And it was this glorious desolation, as Buzz Aldrin put it. The only person in history to leave a family photo on the moon is Charles Duke. The media once characterized it as a heartwarming personal experience that had nothing to do with scientific objectives. There was more to the image than just his wife and 2 sons. Duke claimed that a coded symbol, an internal string of characters exclusive to NASA's Special Purpose Communication System, was printed on the back of it. Other than the test apparatus and the picture, I was not supposed to leave anything behind, but I had to. According to Duke, the fact that a scanned copy of the image with the peculiar ink on the back has been kept at the Houston Center since the 1970s but is not included in any official NASA records serves as more evidence of this information. In a recent private interview, Duke claimed that following a direct discussion with his superiors during pre-mission training, he personally recommended bringing the picture. I'm not sure who agreed or why, but I was told quite plainly that there was only one object, one time, and no questions asked. Following that, Duke recalled, he was in charge of the last staging location at EVA-3, where the equipment was gathered, as Apollo 16 got ready to depart the lunar surface. A rock with a unique code that did not correspond to the official rock sample numbering scheme in the report was next to the photo, which was positioned in the south corner close to the lander, around 7 meters from the rover area. Duke claims that the location of the photo was not decided at random. He referred to this as the signal interference point, which is where the most peculiar disruptions were seen during the first geomagnetic measurements. The image was left in place since the Apollo 16 team only moved the receiver to change its position once throughout the mission. Significantly, the seismic data gathered 40 minutes after the team's departure revealed a number of oddities that were seen but not addressed in any documentation made available to the public. Although the disturbance was not specifically stated by Charles Duke, he made a point of saying, "The photo was not left because I wanted it. It was requested and I just did it." The photo was originally widely reported on American media, but official records have since rarely brought it up. Reprints of the original photograph up until recently revealed faint scribbling thought to be Duke's and rubber traces on the back. Duke stated in an unpublished interview, "Each of us has our own way of keeping quiet. For me, it was a photograph." When asked why he didn't disclose it sooner, Duke simply responded, "The photograph stayed there so I could leave." Charles Duke's silence was a result of both what he saw on the location where he had been and the act of leaving a photograph. As Apollo 16 got closer to the landing zone and location he acknowledged was different from the first time I viewed it from orbit, the symptoms started to become more obvious. And a number of strange things that could not be explained by conventional facts or coincidence happened there during those hours on the lunar surface. The meeting in the dark of the hills of Descartes. Because of its untamed landscape, which had never been seen before, the Descartes Plateau was selected as the landing site for Apollo 16. Charles Duke mentioned on several occasions that there was something in the vicinity that was causing the instruments to become unsteady. In an internal crew memo, he described, "We saw faint points of light moving slowly, then disappearing behind the rocks." Upon landing, the probe detected an unusual signal coming from the north of the plateau. Duke and John Young were instructed to adjust the module's position a few hundred meters to avoid the area. He claims this was not part of the original plan, and the change was only communicated to mission control after landing. During their second lunar walk, while the two were traveling with the rover, the transmitter experienced a 7-minute interference. They called back several times, but the audio signal was only static while all systems appeared to be functioning normally. After the problem, Duke requested a stop to check, but ground orders told him to continue. In the flight log, he noted there was a noise like metal hitting metal, not coming from the equipment. The corresponding recording was confirmed to exist in the technical archive. After returning to Earth, that part of the signal was removed from the public tape. Nonetheless, Duke said the entire control team heard it clearly during the live transmission. Hours later, at the final rock sampling point, the portable seismometer showed unusual movement. Duke noted in his handwritten log, "The oscillations are increasing like something is moving underneath." He was not allowed to continue testing because the EVA was nearing its end. In a recent interview, Duke admitted that the incident was the only time I was truly scared. "We were standing on the quietest land known to man. But underfoot, everything was shaking slightly. No one wanted to talk about it anymore," he recalled. Back in the module, he did a quick inspection of the samples. One marked with an unusual code was a darker gray, smoother, and colder than the others. After the flight, it was no longer included in the 200 pounds rock catalog. In a separate video, Duke remarked tersely, "There's something they took, and I know exactly what it is." He did not elaborate on what the object was, but indicated that the data related to it was classified at a highly classified level. Years later, when asked about the time of the loss of contact, Duke simply replied, "We never lost contact. We were cut off from the main channel." Information about the seismic signals and fluctuations recorded coincided with his diary showing an unusual activity lasting about 20 minutes. This data was encoded in a special symbol in the technical records only to be deciphered decades later, matching Duke's account. "Everything we do is recorded," he said at the Texas meeting. But not everything is kept. This statement has been interpreted by many as evidence that some information was omitted in the process of publication. In addition to the technical data, Duke's handwritten notes reveal a marked change in his mood. The last entries in his Descartes diary read, "Seen, heard, understood what they want to hide." No further notes are made after this. Life after returning to Earth was unlike any other Apollo crew member. While others were celebrated, rested, and shared in their experiences, for Duke, things began to change as soon as he stepped off the capsule. The threat on Earth and the contract that couldn't be broken. Immediately after returning from Apollo 16, Charles Duke did not get the same rest as other astronauts. Within the first 48 hours, he was asked to attend a private meeting that lasted more than 3 hours with only 3 people present besides himself. The meeting was not held at the Johnson Space Center, but at a facility under direct control of the Air Force. There he was given a special document, a pledge of absolute secrecy stamped with the highest level of security at the time. In the document, Duke was asked to confirm that all the unusual phenomena observed during the trip would never be mentioned again in any context, including before Congress or in internal hearings. Attached to the document was a verbal note from one of the 3 present. "You have done your duty. Don't let what you saw mess up the rest of your life." Duke was not allowed to keep a copy of the pledge. After signing, the entire document was confiscated on the spot. "I signed something that I couldn't take back," he confirmed in a closed-door interview last year. "They didn't ask me to lie. They asked me to keep quiet." Since then, his every move has been closely monitored. He has been accompanied by at least one representative from the Federal Censorship Agency whenever he attends a public event. Questions that are not technical are cut from the recording or not broadcast. Many assumed this was standard procedure, but Duke revealed there was a clear difference between him and his contemporaries. When a fellow astronaut commented on the strange object on the moon, he was suspended from speaking for 2 years. Charles Duke never mentioned it publicly, but in a private conversation, he said, "I know what they can do." Years later, he explained, "I didn't shy away because I had nothing to say." One of his most tense press conferences occurred at an aviation conference when a member of the audience abruptly asked him about the signal loss during Apollo 16. Duke swiftly changed the topic and the press conference ended in a matter of minutes. "I didn't have a choice." The pressure to remain silent wasn't limited to the authorities. During his post-mission years, he received a number of calls from unknown sources, most of which said the same thing: "Keep your promise." Once he was on a business trip and discovered that personal documents had been opened, though there was no sign of a break-in. These incidents were never reported, but Duke kept careful notes in his personal notebook. When asked why he did not refuse to sign the pledge, he replied emphatically, "It was not an option at the time." Since then, he has largely avoided any discussion of topics beyond technical ones. Although he appears regularly at scientific conferences, he has always kept to the limits of the permitted content. Not once has Duke published information without approval. In an unreleased recording, he said, "I knew what would happen if I spoke. I also knew what would happen if I didn't, and I chose to let others live in peace." This pressure lasted for decades, affecting his entire family. His wife once shared that he often woke up in the middle of the night, said nothing, just walked around the house in silence. Duke never confirmed the cause, but he repeatedly said, "I saw something I shouldn't have seen, and they don't want me to repeat it." Keeping silent for many years was not only to comply with the commitment, but also the only way to protect the safety of himself and those close to him. It was from this moment that the stories he never told began to be recorded. And it all started with a lingering dream before the day he left Earth. The dream before the launch and the shadows that stayed. A week before Apollo 16 launched, Charles Duke fell ill with a severe flu. He was confined to the crew quarters where he was cared for in isolation to ensure he was fit for the mission. During his fever, he experienced a dream that lasted several hours, which he later described as the scariest thing before the flight. The dream was not like a typical nightmare. Duke said he was standing on a barren land with the silhouette of a tilted module in the distance and the sky as gray as ash. He called out, but no one answered. When he tried to move, he noticed the ground beneath him vibrating slightly, emitting a metallic sound. The sensation was so real that when he woke up, it took him several minutes to realize he was in a quarantine area in Houston. When he awoke, he told his wife about the dream, but he did not elaborate. He simply said, "I'm not sure I'll come back." Di Duke, who had remained calm throughout the training, recorded this in her diary. Years later, she confirmed that it was the only time her husband had ever shown any fear before a mission. After the flight, Duke never mentioned the dream in public, but in private meetings, he said, "The dream did not stop when I woke up." He believed that the experience was related to what happened during the trip and to what he witnessed on the Cartesian plateau. After Apollo 16, the dream returned repeatedly. He said that every time he closed his eyes, he would see the module falling and a dark area spreading behind it. The dreams became so frequent that he began to have trouble sleeping. There were nights when he would lie awake until dawn, staring out the window, waiting for the sun to rise before going to sleep. He once described it as, "I knew something was watching. The moon wasn't the location. I had it inside me." At this point, Duke started to undergo significant change. He quit his job as an engineer to become an activist for social and religious causes. Though he periodically repeated a statement in speeches, he claimed that faith was the source of his redemption. Humans are not able to explain everything. In a private conversation, Duke once said very slowly and firmly, "I saw something that wasn't in the training plan." When asked what he meant, a former colleague recalled, Duke simply said, "You weren't there, so you wouldn't understand." The dream became more frequent after he turned 80. Every time, he would awaken in the middle of the night and take a silent stroll around the house. According to his relatives, he would frequently stand in front of old family pictures as though he were comparing them to something he remembered. It was a place he never really left. In a secret recording, Doi Duke once said. Duke claimed that at first, he believed the dream was the product of stress. However, he was increasingly certain that it was a type of memory that he would never be able to get rid of. "I didn't have a lost dream," he added, "I just dreamed that where I was, there was something unfinished." Many of Duke's loved ones were taken aback by his sudden change in behavior and demeanor. He was regarded as a quiet, collected individual who always acted in a military manner. People believed he had overcome his beliefs after he had been talking about it in public for a year. In practice, however, he still carried a feeling of terror. And for that reason, he made the decision to make one final statement. No longer to narrate a tale, but to express what had never been recognized. Finally, before it's too late, the confession. Charles Duke, who was 90 years old, unscripted and unedited in almost 20-minute film. Sitting by himself, he spoke in a steady, unhurried voice as though every syllable had been suppressed for too long while staring directly at the camera. He acknowledged that during the Apollo 16 mission, his team discovered an area of odd signals roughly 500 meters from the module. The audio started with the phrase, "I have been silent as they asked me to be for 50 years. He received an oscillating signal of unknown origin that repeated in an 11-second cycle while the equipment was being tested. For almost 17 minutes, the seismograph displayed an abrupt surge in values that did not correspond to any human activity. Duke did not specify the precise position, but he claimed that a cylindrical object around his height, with a body covered in fine dust, inhabited the region. Not reported to the center, not shown on topographic maps. He found the item when John Young was in the command module, so the story goes. He could only watch it for a few minutes because of time constraints. I had never seen a device like the one he described. More significantly, unlike rocks, it did not reflect light. Duke doesn't use any speculative language in the video. He makes it clear that this is neither an emotion nor an error. He says, "I know what I saw. I am aware that it was not brought up by us, and I am aware that I am not permitted to discuss it." He waited for another voice over the following 50 years, but no living person ever brought it up. Everyone has signed the same promise, he thought. Regarding the item, he said that it was in good condition but had a dent in the center, as though it had been mechanically damaged. His radio made a loud crackling sound that lasted for 4 seconds just as he was turning to pick up a close specimen. Then there was quiet. No copy of Apollo 16 that was made available to the public contained the signal. Duke asserted, however, that he was aware the original data remained. Simply put, it was never made accessible. When I realized that something greater than ourselves was happening, he referred to the entire event. He concluded by emphasizing, "I don't need anyone to believe me. I just need someone to record this." Duke declined to comment further about the video. According to his relatives, this was the final time he made any reference to the Apollo 16 mission. His entire life was linked to a program that never fully disclosed the facts. The signal he knew he had transmitted, however, was what he remembered most, not the lunar surface. Everything else started with that signal. The account of Charles Duke is really thought-provoking. He discloses the last words of a historical witness who remained silent for half a century, in addition to the memories of a guy who set foot on the moon. Please support the material by leaving a like if you think the information in this video is worthwhile sharing. To ensure you don't miss any more significant stories, remember to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. How do you feel about Charles Duke's remarks? Comment in the space provided below. I'll read everything.